Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. Not surprisingly, public opinion in India erupted in anger when we first learnt the two sports officials have been arrested in Glasgow for serious offences. That was the state of affairs right through the day today. But the question is, thereafter this evening we've discovered that in fact those officials have been discharged. There is no evidence against them, no charges were filed against them. So was the response that lasted right through the day justified, or was it based on a hasty conclusion of guilt? And now the charges have been dropped. Have we, the people of India, the press in particular, and many sportsmen who spoke out, been left with egg on our face? Joining me to speak about what's happened is former world billiards champion Michael Ferreira, the sports advisor of the Hindustan Times Pradeep magazine, the well-known international athlete Ashwini Nachappa, and the sports consulting editor of the India Today group, Boria Majumdar, who joins us from England. I have to begin by saying that all of us, in a sense, are now looking pretty shamefaced because the media as a whole, many sportsmen, sportswomen as individuals, were criticizing the two officials right through the day because we had all assumed that because we believed they were charged, they were guilty. It transpires that the charges have been dropped. There is no evidence against them, and they are by no means guilty. They are, in fact, as far as the law is concerned, innocent. So, Michael Ferreira, let me ask you a simple question. Are all of us left with egg on the face?
Well, it would appear so, but I'm wondering if there's been some fancy footwork in the background. I ask you to consider this. If Mehta was drunk, it's a question of fact. Were the tests properly taken? Number one. Number two, did he actually collide with another car? That's a question of fact. Number three, was anyone injured? This also is a question of fact. Now, if these facts are before the court, I am a little puzzled as to how they say there is a lack of evidence. Not that I have carrying any sort of grudge against the man. I'm neutral in this. But it's astonishing that what was so clear, let's say 2 or 3 hours ago, has now suddenly been turned on its head. Also, I would like to put forward this fact that I heard Sushil Kumar speak about Virendra Malik, and he said he is not like that. I know him very well. And the reports that we received were that he grabbed the receptionist's hand. To call this sexual assault is stretching it a bit. That's my prima facie reaction to what's going on.
Boria Majumdar, you are in England. You've been in touch with Indian High Commission officials. You may well by now have also been in touch with some members of the Indian sports delegation in Glasgow. What explanation do they give for the fact that the sort of evidence Michael Ferreira was alluding to has now been considered by the court not to be sufficient, and thus the charges have been dropped? And so the question I'm really asking is this: were the charges made when they were made on Saturday on false premises and on false grounds? Or has the court decided that the so-called evidence doesn't stand up? Or have the police decided that they've changed their mind? Or possibly, as Michael Ferreira began by suggesting, was there what he calls fancy footwork?
It was much better than fancy footwork is what I understand, because I spoke to, after you and I spoke off air about half an hour back, I spoke to Indian High Commission officials, Sports Ministry officials, I beg your pardon, who've just landed in London, and they were as surprised as you and me when I said, have you heard that the charges have been dropped? They said, are you serious? That was the reaction. And then when I called them 5 minutes later, they said, we know exactly what you know, that charges have been dropped for lack of sufficient evidence. So obviously the Indian High Commission got into the act. Obviously they tried to sort of ensure that further shame was not heaped on India. So now the Scotland police needs to give an explanation. Why arrest? Why keep them in custody all of Sunday? Why this entire fiasco? Why this drama of producing them in court? Because then the nation and Glasgow police owe them an explanation. We should then apologize to them, isn't it? Because
absolutely.
There is no doubt in my mind, and you should ask this question of Ashwini Nachappa, Karan Thapar, that in Melbourne something similar happened. $10,000 were paid and the official went scot-free. A very similar incident happened in Melbourne. Okay. And Ashwini will tell you about it. I am convinced that some very fancy footwork has been undertaken behind the scenes. That is why they are scot-free.
Pradeep magazine, let's first pick up on this allegation, and I'm emphasizing for the audience, it's an allegation, it is an assumption, it is not a fact, that fancy footwork happened. Because the problem with that allegation or interpretation is that we're assuming that the British police or the Scottish police in this instance are a bit like the Indian police, that a High Commission can come and pay the money or lean on them and they will change what they're doing. That's never happened. It's not something anyone has ever accused the British police of before. So do you think that the Indian High Commission, A, has the capacity to undertake fancy footwork? They're not very influential in England or Scotland. And secondly, do you think the Scottish police, who have a reputation for being upright, would actually buckle under diplomatic pressure?
Well, actually, frankly, I'm as confused and as baffled as anyone here is. As Michael said, and I agree with him, that how come, like, you level such serious charges and the next day you drop it? Either the Scotland police bungled, as Boria is saying, they owe an apology to these two people. They owe an apology to India because they were officially representing India. It's Commonwealth Games. We all felt embarrassed yesterday as we all discussed his threadbare that look. And since we lack so much of trust and faith in our officials, that we are willing to even go to the extent that even before the case is proved in the court or charges are framed, we jump to the conclusion they must have done it because we feel that they lack all ethics and morals. So this is, in this kind of a situation, I am as baffled as anyone is how to explain this. But obviously, if the charges have been dropped, I think the Scotland police owe an apology to these two gentlemen as well as to the country, that I mean India.
I'll go quickly back to you, Boria Majumdar. Have the Scottish police said anything officially about A, why they arrested these two, B, why they detained them in jail over Sunday, and C, why now they suddenly discover the charges or the evidence is insufficient? Have they made any explanation, any formal statement?
Saturday when I called them, they said arrested in two different parts, one for drunken driving, one for sexual assault. They said it categorically. Not about keeping them in custody, because Sunday they did not say anything further to what they said on Saturday night, rather Sunday morning. Today when I called them 25 minutes back, all they said was charges dropped, not a single more word. And I need to put this on record. The High Commission fellow very clearly said the solicitor has asked us to tell you that there is not sufficient evidence. Okay. Now these were the words, and he said, the High Commission will soon issue a press release, Karan, so you will get to know. But the official explanation, lack of sufficient evidence. That's all. All right. No more words from the High Commission or the police.
We clearly have a mystery about what actually happened in Glasgow, what sort of evidence there was, why that evidence is now found to be insufficient, what statement the Scottish police will put out to explain why they arrested two people when they don't have evidence against them and why they couldn't even bring the case to court. But let's move beyond that, Ashwini Chappa, and focus on how all of us as individuals responded to the charges when we believed the charges were real. You were on several television channels being pretty sharply critical of both people. You, if I recall correctly your words, you said that they had embarrassed and ashamed India. Do you today feel a little sorry for the fact that you spoke out so quickly and came to a judgment when it turns out these people are innocent?
Not at all. The very fact that they were arrested, the very fact that they were in police custody, and the very fact that over 2 hours of negotiations have taken place to have this judgment clearly shows that there was something wrong. What the compromise formula was at the end, nobody knows. How they arrived at that compromise formula, I thought these things happen only in India, but now I think we've all been awakened, it happens in Scotland too.
Can I interrupt? You're saying that you don't owe an apology to these people despite the fact you criticized them in public and said they were an embarrassment to India because there were 2 hours of negotiation and because the police had arrested and attempted to charge them. In the end, they weren't charged. But is it not possible for the police to have been mistaken, for the police to have acted wrongly? And if that is the case, that the police were acting wrongly, then surely you can't justify your criticism of these people on that basis.
Do you truly believe that, Karan?
I see no reason why I should disbelieve it. That the Scottish police should be
so naive that to arrest them and keep them in police custody for 2 days and say that they were innocent?
So you're suggesting that the Indian government or the Indian High Commission or maybe the British government acting on behalf of the Indian government put pressure on the Scottish police and therefore the Scottish police changed their mind under pressure? Is that what you're suggesting?
The only way we all can give an apology is for the IOA now to press charges against the Scottish police to say why did they arrest them if there was no charges.
That may happen. All of this is only developed about an hour and a quarter ago, so that may happen, which is why I'm coming back. Don't you think you owe these people an apology? You've accused two people who turned out to be innocent of being an embarrassment and a shame to India, when clearly they weren't.
I think everybody who has voiced their opinion has been because of the media reports that have come out, and it clearly shows that they had brought shame to the nation. If these reports that you all were showing in every television channels were not true, then you all must question yourselves.
You're absolutely right to bring it up, and I'm going to put it to you first, and then I'll go to Michael Ferreira. Pradeep, do we as journalists, does the media as a whole, television in particular, but the newspapers too, owe an apology? We all came to the hasty conclusion that if they're arrested, they're guilty. If they're in jail, they'll be charged. If they're charged, they're a shame and embarrassment to the country. And we turn out to be completely wrong. So do we owe these two gentlemen an apology?
See, at the moment, going by just the facts, I think we do owe an apology to them, saying sorry, we jumped the gun. We didn't wait for the court to decide whether the charges were right or wrong. But you know, this is a larger malice in India that if you look at television, if you look at newspapers, look at any n number of cases which are debated as if the accused is guilty. See, there are a number of times those accused are set free by the courts, but by till then the damage has been done. I think there is a lesson in this for us that, okay, let's debate all these things, but let's not debate it as if it's a fact that yes, they are guilty and they've been...
and in fact, there's a bigger lesson. Before you start debating someone being charged, you need to wait for them to actually to be charged. You didn't even know what they were being charged for. All you knew, they were arrested. That's all we knew. We had no idea what they were being charged for, what the specific penal offense would be.
You know, this could be well true. Let me add one just brief point. This could be well true. We should wait to see that now the Indian delegation, the IOA, should actually should go to the court, should sue Scotland police for damages. Will they do that? Because they have embarrassed their officials.
Absolutely, they may well. It's only, as I said,
yeah, but we should wait whether they will or not.
We have to give them time.
Yeah,
it's only an hour and a half since this news broke.
So we shouldn't
Michael
jump to the
Ferreira,
conclusion.
there's no doubt that the media, with its intense, and now I will say biased and wrong coverage, misled people. But should so many sports persons have been willingly misled, and so many sports associations have been willingly misled? Surely sports persons who were so eager to appear on television channels and criticize these two should have actually said, hang on, we need at least some evidence of guilt. We need at least for a court to judge before we jump in to ourselves condemn. So how much of the responsibility and the guilt lies with individual sports persons who played along with the media?
I think the media does tend to get hyper over cases like this, and it's understandable. I agree with Pradeep that at this point of time, it looks like we do owe these guys an apology. However, my question still remains unanswered, because if a person was driving in a drunken state, that is an absolute matter of fact. Did the Scottish police take the breathalyzer test? Yes or no? Number two, did he collide with a car? That's a matter of fact. Yes or no? Number three, was anyone injured? Yes or no? All these are questions of fact. Now, if these are questions of fact, surely it is my submission that there is some sort of evidence. And why this evidence was not considered is the big puzzle. And it's something which I mean, all of us are astounded at. So far as Malik is concerned, like I said before, the reports say that he tried to hold the receptionist's hand. Now, it's stretching it a bit to call that sexual assault. It isn't as if he thrust himself upon her, or so we gather from the press reports. So therefore, perhaps we were wrong. I don't know.
Okay.
Like Pradeep says, I'm a bit confused myself.
You know, I want to go to you on that particular specific point about Mr. Malik, and I want to put this to you, Boria Majumdar. This afternoon, long before we discovered that the charges would be dropped, long before, in fact, Mr. Malik even appeared in court, the Wrestling Federation had suspended him. The president of the Wrestling Federation went on air to say that this was an intolerable situation, and the man was suspended. Does the Federation owe him an apology? They jumped to a conclusion and got it completely wrong. In the process, they have added further insult and injury to an innocent man's reputation. Do they now owe him an apology?
So just imagine what kind of faith the Wrestling Federation has on its own official. Question number one, point number one. Point number two, the IOA president, N. Ramachandran, has been in Glasgow for the last 2 days. He's parked himself there. All he said officially was, we will take stern action. Not for once did he say, oh, they are innocent, the police may have done something wrong. Because I'm sure the IOA officials were, in touch, communicating to each other that there has been something wrong. Not for once. Did you actually hear anyone from the IOA or the Sports Ministry or anyone saying, oh, these people are innocent, the Scottish police is at fault? And what Michael Ferreira said, let me echo. The police is on record saying alleged sexual harassment and drunken driving and accident. So they will either have to retreat that statement issued on Sunday morning and immediately say that we were incompetent, we falsified evidence, we did this, and in fact they interrogated this man, chased him into his hotel. That's what, and who has told us all of this? I want to put this on record. All of this was told to us by ministry officials, by Indian High Commission officials, constantly giving out information which we put out in the media. So when you say that the media has been irresponsible, your High Commission was irresponsible, the ministry was irresponsible, the Indian contingent in Glasgow was irresponsible as well, Karan, because otherwise none of this information would have petered out into the media.
Can I stop you? Can I stop you for a minute? Is therefore one of the conclusions you're coming to that Indian High Commission officials, the sports contingent officials, the ministry officials not only owe an explanation for the information they were putting out and the briefing they were giving the media, but also they probably owe an apology to these two gentlemen, because they, through the information they were putting out, led people to wrongly conclude these boys were guilty when they weren't.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what were we reporting? We were not reporting second-hand facts. We were being told either by the police or by the Scottish authorities, or by the Indian authorities, i.e. the High Commission or the Sports Ministry. And we were reporting facts, as Michael said. Was there an accident? We were told yes. Was this man drunk? We were told yes. Did this man sexually harass the receptionist? We were told yes. The media went and did its job. Yes, the debate perhaps went a bit too far because it was based on facts that we were given out. So now it's the responsibility of the ministry or the High Commission or everybody concerned with Indian sport here in Glasgow or were in Glasgow to apologize. Because don't only blame the media or the former sports people.
Ashwini Chappa, let me put that specific question that I put a moment ago to Bore Majumdar regarding the Wrestling Federation to you. This afternoon, their president went on air and suspended Mr. Malik. He did it before Mr. Malik even appeared in court. He did it before we even knew what the specific charges against Mr. Malik were. And now that those charges have been dropped, now that we know there's no evidence, do you think that the Wrestling Federation, the body that he represents and he's a member of, should have at least shown sufficient caution, if not loyalty, to wait for the facts to be established before they took penal action against the man? And do they therefore owe him an apology?
Well, I can only say that I can congratulate this person who has done this, because nobody takes action on these officials. And for the first time, somebody from the Federation has actually taken note of the reports that has come in. It has brought shame to the Wrestling Federation and they have taken action. But they have said we have suspended him and we will wait for the report till we are clear on what the facts are and then take further action. But did you hear one of the IOA officials even make a comment? This is the action that is required.
Can I interrupt?
If there are reports,
can I interrupt?
And there are.
Can I interrupt for a moment? I get the feeling from your answer that action needed to be taken regardless of whether the people you're taking action against are innocent or guilty. The impression you give me is that once accusations of this nature are raised, action is immediate. You don't need to establish guilt. You don't need to wait for the facts. Action has to happen first. The problem with that position is that you end up with the situation you do today. You've acted. Now that you know the full story, you discover you acted wrongly and you owe an apology. So was it wise to act? This hunger for action has actually, in this case, led us down the wrong path.
Well, as Boria clearly mentioned, what was the reasons to take these actions? The information came from the ministry, the information came from the police. you think we are fools to say that these are all untrue or not to be, taken seriously? It was taken seriously based on the reports and the news that was given out by officials at Glasgow. So, I mean, they have taken action. So right now they can always say, since it was, there's no evidence on these people, we can reinstate them. There's nothing wrong in that. But we need to show that action only on athletes should not be taken.
Except their reputations have suffered. You've done damage to them in the public eye. One man is thought of as a woman assaulter, the other is thought of as a drunken driver.
How many athletes' reputation has suffered? Take for Shanti Sundarajan. Take for Pinky. What have the officials done? Their reputation and their lives are not at stake?
In other words, there's a certain element of schadenfreude or revenge, isn't there? You're delighted because others have suffered, therefore these people, innocent or not, should suffer as well.
It is not delight. It is time to take action if there is evidence and if there is reports that are coming in from official and, sources which are...
Michael Ferreira, I saw you raising your hand over there, and I want to put that same critical, I would call it moral point to you. There is a terrible hunger for action in India because we believe otherwise, because of contacts, because they're influential, people who've made terrible mistakes get away scot-free. That, in a sense, is the moral motivation behind the desire to see people punished the second the first accusation against them emerges, without waiting for fact, without waiting for evidence, without waiting for conclusive proof. But do you think in this instance, we've actually all committed a terrible moral lapse? That in fact, at the end of the day, we are embarrassed, not these people.
Karan, I think we have to acknowledge, we have to concede to ourselves that we are so conditioned to the shenanigans of officialdom that we tend by default to assume that the allegations made are more or less true. I think that is part of the DNA of all of us, because we've suffered at the hands of officialdom and we've seen, like I say, the shenanigans of these guys over the years. So by default, we tend to believe that what is alleged is true. Perhaps we need to review this kind of mindset and be more neutral in future.
That's the lesson for all of us as a press and as a society. But it's very interesting the way this episode is ending. It began with all of us completely convinced that the two Indian officials were guilty and in the dock, and no one even wanted to listen to their explanation. We decided they were wrong. Now it's ending with Scottish police in the dock. Questions are being raised whether they buckled under pressure, who that pressure came from. Questions are being raised whether they had grounds at all to arrest them, whether they had grounds to then keep them in jail, whether the confirmation they gave about the grounds for arrest was legitimate or not. Suddenly, do you find that the British police, because the Scottish police is part of the British police, an institution we all admired, has huge question marks against them?
You know, Karan, had this thing happened with two Indians, not representing the Indian officialdom, I think this India would have jumped straight with the conclusion that there is something racial involved in this. Then how come two Indians were picked up and next day they were not even, like the charges were dropped. But in this case, just because, as Ashwani is saying, as Michael is saying, that our trust in our officialdom is so little that we all feel that they have done so much wrong that the moment, even if they are suspected, if the police says that yes, this is a possibility, you will say they obviously they have done so much earlier, this is true, catch them. So this lack of trust deficit, and also in a background of a society which has no trust in their police, in their judiciary, so all this is bound to happen.
All right, that is an explanation for the way we jumped the gun and got it terribly wrong, and you may well be right. Let me put the opposite to you, Boria Majumdar. Suppose for a moment two British officials had been arrested for drunken driving and assault in India by the Indian police, kept in jail overnight, and then it had been discovered there was no evidence, the charges were dropped and they'd been released, right? What would the British media have said?
Karan, forget the British media, it's been 1 hour plus. Have you seen the Indian High Commission question the Scottish police issuing a press release? Have you seen the Indian government acting saying you have disgraced India? Have you seen the IOA acting saying you have disgraced India, you owe us an explanation? In an age of 24/7 media, you think 1.5 hours is too little for anyone to act and question the Scottish police? You asked us if we are embarrassed. If anyone is embarrassed, it has to be the Scottish police. And India needs to rub this point home. Okay. Have you done it? If you have not done it, the question of fancy footwork as raised by Michael Ferreira has to come to the fore. Right. Was there a compromise? Was there an underhand deal? Was something in the wrong that the Scottish police are now being forced to cover? Because look, either the Scottish police is at fault or these people are at fault. It is a matter of fact. One group of people are at fault. If these people are innocent, then Scottish police have egg on their face.
I'm interrupting you to say that I'm being told by my producer in my ear that the Indian High Commission has now announced that they will soon be issuing a press release. Clearly, they've heard you.
That I said already.
They've clearly.
No, that I said already on air. Because I was told that 1 hour back that they will issue a press release, and in that press release all they will say is charges dropped for lack of sufficient evidence.
All right.
I want to see the Indian High Commission go ahead and sue the Scottish police. I want them to take this matter further, because a national shame has been used.
I heard you. Very quickly, Michael, and this has to be a short answer because we're out of time. Do you think the British system, and the British system has to speak in the shape and form of the British government, owes an apology to these two people? If, as it now seems, they were wrongly arrested, wrongly held in jail, and their good, fair, innocent name wrongly besmirched, does the British system owe them an apology?
Not only do they owe them an apology, but I 100% agree with Boria that we must follow through. We must sue them for false arrest or whatever. Throw the book at them.
Okay. I'm going to have to leave you with the last word. We must sue them. If we were so angry against them when we thought they were guilty, today then, when it turns out they're innocent, we must show them the same level of support, because I think that is something we also owe those two officials. This has been a peculiar evening where the story literally turned on its head 20 minutes before we went on air. My thanks to my 4 guests for joining me and for agreeing to change the story completely as we went along and discovered that it was a very different issue to the one that we thought we were raising. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye.